Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a show with executive directors and key people of local nonprofits. I have worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years. In those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide critical services we sometimes take for granted. Many times, we only hear about these important groups when you get a letter from them asking you for money. This is a chance to hear about organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or USM. Today we have a very special guest with us, Barbara Edmond of the Maine Philanthropic Center. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Wow. So you just moved back to Maine about a year ago?
Yes, and I'm thrilled to be back in Maine. I had a little 9-year hiatus, but have really lived in Maine off and on for over 30 years. So.
Okay, in that quiet little town of D.C., right?
Yeah.
So tell us, what is the Maine Philanthropic Center?
It's actually the Maine Philanthropy Center.
Philanthropy Center. I apologize. I should know better.
That's not a problem. And so what we are is a membership and leadership organization really designed to do, I call it 3 things. One is to build the awareness of philanthropy, 2, to build the effectiveness of philanthropy, and 3, the impact of philanthropy.
So you don't actually give out money?
We do not give out money.
Okay.
And so how I would describe it is that we have several constituents, and members too. Most anyone and everyone who gives out funding in the state of Maine is a potential member of the Maine Philanthropy Center. So the whole funding side, so we have foundations, we have corporate charitable departments and foundations, we have individual philanthropists, and United Way's are members, so anyone on that side. And then we also have nonprofit members, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later and how what we provide for them. But then we also feel very strongly that those 2 components actually make up the philanthropic sector, those who give money and those who actually make the money turn into things on the ground. And our job is to provide a linkage between the 2.
Can you give us a specific example, a program that you do that might do that?
Sure. So one of the programs that's very popular that we do is called Meet the Funders. And so what we'll do is we'll pull together 3 or 4 funders, and we'll put out an open call to membership and nonprofits, and they'll have a chance to come to a session and hear from the funders in terms of what they're looking for, what kind of requirements they have, what subject areas they're interested in, and then have kind of an open dialogue between the funders and nonprofits to kind of take questions and answers and talk about challenges and that kind of thing. So we do that a couple times a year, and we move it around the state, so it gives people a chance to get there.
Excuse me. So you deal with both funders and people looking for money.
Exactly.
Okay. If you had to identify one major problem that you see in the nonprofit world today, what would it be?
I think from where I'm sitting right now, the one major challenge, I don't know if I call it a problem, but is people's ability to talk about what they do in plain English and also to get at the end game is what I call it. So what's your end game? So let me give you an example. Very often you might be talking to a nonprofit and they start talking about what they do and you quickly are like, I still don't get it, because they get very technical and they get into the process of what they do. But an example might be someone would say, well, we're an organization that works with at-risk youth. For me, the end game is, well, what are you trying to do with those at-risk youth?
Right.
Are you trying to have them be more successful in school? Are you trying to help them be better integrated socially? Where are you trying to get to is really the important thing that you want to talk to people about. And when you're trying to convince people to give you money, it's the end game that you really need to always keep in front of people, because that's why they want to give it to you.
I mean, if you had to ask me that question as a consultant, that's the biggest frustration that I have. So
we're kindred spirits on the problem.
when I ask a group, so what do you do? And they give me, and one of my presidents in one of my past agencies called it the technical gobbledygook. You don't want to hear that. What are you going to do at the end of the day with the money, and how are you going to improve people's lives?
Exactly. And at some point, you are going to have to tell people how you're going to do it.
Absolutely.
But people want to give to visions.
Right.
And not process most of the time.
So do you have to do fundraising yourself?
Most of our membership, or most of our revenue source, we are a nonprofit, so we don't take that for granted. So a big part of about 60% of our revenue comes from memberships. The bulk of it is actually our grant maker members. Their memberships are higher, and then we have about 81 grant maker members in the state of Maine.
So these are foundations and groups that distribute money.
They do, and they pay membership to us as kind of an association for them. We're a place for them where they can get together, where they can share challenges. We have programs for funders, if they all want to get together and talk about evaluation, or now more and more people are looking at issue areas. Do they want to talk about certain issue areas they're working on? So that's kind of the grant maker membership. And then there's also an associate membership, which is our nonprofits. And then we have a third component of that, which is actually professionals and consultants,
right?
Who can also participate in the Maine Philanthropy Center. So all of those memberships combined is about 60% of our revenues. We actually also have programs. So, and most often the programs have a cost associated with them. So we try to cover our costs, but then actually have some earned revenue from those programs. And then a big part of our revenue source is also earned revenue, but every 2 years we have a very large Philanthropy Partners Conference, which we just had last week, and that's another big part of our revenue. So a little bit of everything.
Talk a little bit about the conference. What happened there?
We had 380 folks from both the from the funder world and the nonprofit world, and together the philanthropic sector in Maine was there in one place to get a chance to talk to each other, to be challenged by some keynote speakers, and to have sessions where we had sessions on topics like diversity, advocacy. We had a very popular session on funder-fundee relationships where the players were asked to switch roles. So the nonprofits became funders and the funders became nonprofits, and to walk in each other's shoes and see what it feels like. We had some sessions on issue areas. So there was a session on aging. We had a session on community impact, which told stories about a community coalition in Farmington and how that worked. So a combination of full group things and then individual sessions. And we were always trying to be creative, because it's not always easy for a nonprofit to walk up to a funder and introduce themselves and say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and this is what I do.
And how much money I need."
Yeah. And so, we provided some opportunities for networking, but we also tried. It was a bit of a risk, but it worked fairly well, I thought. We actually took the entire 380 people and divided them up into teams, which we carefully made sure we had funders in each team, and then filled it with nonprofits. And we did trivia around philanthropy, the nonprofit world, and the Maine Philanthropy Center. And so they got a chance to be in a group with people that they might not have otherwise met and do something fun together, just to try to get to level the playing field and to understand that at the end of the day, we're all people. And the nonprofits need money to support their work. And quite frankly, the funders need places to give out their money.
Right. They have to give it away by law.
They have to give it away. And so they're just on a search to find the best sources of that. And then my other thing that I try to really encourage people, it's kind of matchmaker, that not every funder is going to give to just any organization. Everyone has their goals, their priorities, their direction, or even as an individual philanthropist, you have things you like. And so the biggest challenge for nonprofits is to find their match.
Right.
Figure out who the people are, who the organizations are, who the foundations are that care about the same things that they do. And that takes a little bit of research, but that's also another connection, and a big program source of how we help nonprofits is research.
So if I were an executive of a nonprofit, a small shop, and I'm just overwhelmed with the searching, am I able to come into your office and just talk to you about potential funders in the state?
Actually, what we do is a little bit more higher level than that, because it would be impossible for us. We only have 2.5 staff to actually link one by one nonprofits to funders, and that would be difficult for us to do anyways. But we offer, we have a wonderful program about teaching nonprofits how to research foundations and grant makers. And so we have two great resources. One, we are a participating network partner with the Foundation Center, and they have a nationwide database with like 98,000 entries of funders. And so twice a month, we have a wonderful data and information specialist, Christina Foster. She offers tutorials. And so nonprofits can sign up. It's for free. And you come to the Glickman Library on the USM campus. And she teaches you how to do the research, how to use the Foundation Center database, and how to search. So I want to do something on early childhood, and she teaches you how to research who has provided funding for early childhood in the last 10 years in Maine. And so that's one piece of data that we offer. We also publish our own Maine Grantmakers Directory. So that's 450 grantmakers in Maine. And that you can either purchase a hard copy or you can come into the library and access that. If you become a member of the Maine Philanthropy Center, you can actually access the Maine directory online.
As a grant writer and a fundraising consultant, I've used those services
There you go.
very extensively, and I have to admit that your staff is great. They don't know, they didn't know who I was. They just set me up, and within an hour, I had 400 foundations nationally to begin my search with.
Right.
Then the real work begins.
Exactly. I think people think that, I'm just going to go spend an hour at the library and my life is done. And it actually has only just begun.
Right.
But we share with people how to do that and, how to get started and then how to take it to the next level.
All right. So we have a little trivia.
Okay.
At midway. Okay. And I'm going to guess that you will not get this one. There's only been one correct answer since we've started this. All right. So, you ready?
I'm ready. We'll see.
What happened in Machias in 1775?
Oh.
This is WMPG, and I'm talking today with Barbara Edmond of the Maine Philanthropy Center, and my name is David Unger, host of Nonprofit Insider.
Oh, I would just imagine it had something to do with the tribal community, but beyond that, I don't know.
Actually, the first naval battle of the Revolutionary War was fought off Machias in 1775.
There you go.
So you had mentioned that, I forget the number, there were 400 and some funders in the state.
Mm-hmm.
Is that low, high?
I think it continues to grow in the state of Maine over time. I'm a kind of newcomer at the Maine Philanthropy Center. I've only been here a year. So there may be more than that, but those are funders that we can find through us doing research, funders that have turned in 990s and that kind of thing. It doesn't usually include individual philanthropists, so there's probably more than that.
Right, but in terms of the numbers for the size of the state,
yeah.
I mean, someone who goes into that funding world,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like it's a very low number compared to other states. And some of the foundations, rightly so, are very limited in their scope of what they fund. And finding funds for startups or some outrageous new projects that might make a difference has been very hard for me, at least.
I think that if you were to compare it to other states number by number, you might in fact find that low. But I also think it goes with the state of Maine. I mean, there are organizations and people who have resources, but they are, overall, we think of Maine as a lesser resource state than a lot of the others. And so that coupled with the fact that we hope that someday we'll get out of the bottom 5 in terms of individual giving in charitable contributions, but it's not as strong here in Maine. I will say, though, the 450 is not all based in Maine.
Right.
It's grant makers who actually give in Maine, And as I studied that coming new onto the job, I was amazed of how many out-of-state foundations give in Maine. And I think that's because people come on vacation or they might have come to school here. You know, Maine's a great place. Those of us who live here love it, and those who come to visit also love it. And so what I learned is that sometimes people in their wills will,
Right.
give to their home state in Ohio, but they might also carve out a portion of their estate to fund either Maine, either a specific community because that's where they had a summer home, or a particular issue. So it's very interesting what that mix is. It's not just Mainers.
Oh, no question. And one of the most interesting things that I found is that the funders, are very approachable. And you can actually sit down and talk with them. And I haven't found that in some of the other states that I've worked in.
I think they want to build relationships with folks because I actually, in one of our Meet the Funders, we had a group of funders who said that it's not a good idea if the first time they ever heard about you is when they read your name on a grant application.
Right.
That they actually want to develop relationships with people ahead of time and save everybody a lot of time and effort. So part of it's that research. You need to do your due diligence and make sure that there's a match. But once you think there's a match, to then at least, not all funders is open to this, and most times it's because of, how many people, whether they have staff or don't have staff. But generally, people are open to having a conversation and would much rather have a conversation and give you some direction to tell you whether you're going in the right path or not, as opposed to getting hundreds of applications that in the first 2 minutes they're going to look at and say, no, this isn't appropriate.
So it's almost like I use the relationship-based fundraising model.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same concept that
Absolutely.
you build a relationship with the funder, ask them their opinion, you get their feedback on the project, and through that conversation, they'll either give you a hint whether it's the right way to go or not right way. So it's the same it's like nurturing a major donor in a sense.
Exactly. And remembering all along that just because a funder either doesn't give you nurturing or send you in a different direction is not because you're not doing a good program. It just may not be a priority match.
Right.
So, very often funders will send you to another funder who they know may better be interested in your priority area. But I think sometimes nonprofits, it's so you're looking for funding. It's a lot of work to do grants, and I know on the other side sometimes you just kind of feel a little bit rejected when you get that letter
a little
back.
bit.
Yeah,
I go in my office and close the door and don't come out for a week.
But you'd feel better if in fact you did your due diligence and made sure that at least you were in the right ballpark on a topic that matched. Then you have the opportunity to go back and say, what would have piqued your interest, or was there anything in my proposal that I could have done better? But if it wasn't even in the right subject area, then they're not going to really be able to help you. So
when I was looking up the trivia question today, and that was extensive research on that one, I came across a stat that there were about in 2012 or 2010, I'm sorry, there were 8,900 nonprofits registered in the state of Maine.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to use that as a trivia, but I knew you knew the 2013 number, and the 2010 would have thrown you off. That's a lot of nonprofits for a state this size. And, every time I go into a nonprofit's office, they say, well, we'll go ask so-and-so. And everybody knows who's the so-and-so. And they must get overwhelmed with the number of requests that they get from every nonprofit in the state.
They do. And one of the things is I've now sort of returned to the state and really had a chance to meet with funders. They do a lot of work. They're very focused on their processes and their application processes. And so you can imagine if someone gets 450 grant applications and they have to either they have a grants committee, which may be staff, maybe volunteers, and go through all that, or if they're a small family foundation, there's only one or two members of the family. It's a lot of work, and I just marvel at the due diligence that they do in terms of reading all those proposals and trying to figure out which ones fit and match. When I used to work for United Way and we had fund distribution panels, often volunteers would say giving money away is much harder than raising it because there's so many wonderful organizations and not enough resources. So it's a tough job.
Oh, it's brutal. So if we were to ask a funder what they think the most significant problem of nonprofits in our community today, what do you think they would say?
Oh, I think it's a hard question because nonprofits come in all shapes and sizes.
Right.
So the problems would be different, I think, depending upon your size. So larger ones may have this problem we talked about earlier in terms of communicating in pure English, what they're looking for and not getting too technical. Smaller ones may have problems with figuring out budgets and how to budget for sort of program costs across their budget, and they struggle between these are my operating costs and my program cost, or how do I even do an effective budget. So I think the problems run the gamut. The other issue that I see that people are really trying to wrestle on is the whole issue of what's the outcomes of my work? What is it really achieving? And I think funders are working hand in hand with nonprofits to try to sort of figure that out. What should we be measuring and how should we be reporting things? And different funders are looking for different things. So that's a bit of a challenge, but I think that's another issue.
And this is no comment or commentary on any funder, but it's sometimes difficult when you put that kind of work into a grant and the grant is small, and then you have to do all this massive reporting on outcomes afterwards. So sometimes you have to even scratch your head. Does it cost us more to get the money?
Right, and I think that's part of our three-pronged thing in terms of awareness of philanthropy, effectiveness, and impact. I mean, one of the things that when we work with effectiveness of funders is to actually raise those kinds of questions. Are you asking more than the amount of dollars you're giving out is really requiring? And are you being realistic? And so it's one thing on the reporting side, but it's also realism on the impact side.
Right.
How much do you really think is going to happen on high school graduation for $5,000? You know, that kind of thing. So part of being an effective funder is to try to find your balance there in terms of what you're doing. In terms of nonprofit effectiveness, I need to say we work very closely and partner with the Maine Association of Nonprofits because we really feel like that's their wheelhouse, is building the effectiveness of nonprofits. So we try to build it on the funder side. Maine Association of Nonprofits builds it on the nonprofit side, and then we come back in and try to link the two together.
So do you do any joint programs with that?
We do some joint programs on how to write grants, grant research, a number of skills builder programs that we do together.
So why would anybody want to join you? I didn't say donate.
Yeah, right.
So join the Maine Philanthropy.
I think let me focus on the nonprofit side because that's where most of this program is focused on. So one, you would be able to get online access to grant directory resources,
which is
where
great.
You can get them for free and you can come into the library, but you can't get to them online. We do monthly advisories where we say what's coming up and what grant opportunities are out there, so they get that all the time. You get first access to our Maine Philanthropy programs. You get discounts. You get discounts on our directory. You get discounts on programs. So there's a variety of ways. And then you also get put on our website. So we elevate you. And since there's funders coming to the website all the time, then they get a chance to see your name. So it's a bit different on the funder side, but those would be the nonprofit benefits.
Okay. Should every nonprofit belong, or are there some shops that are too small?
I don't know that there are some that are too small. We have a sliding fee scale, so it goes anywhere from $50, it depends on your budget, to $350, depending on size. Many smaller ones find that by the time they get a discount on coming to the conference, on the directory, and a couple of programs, they've already made their membership money back.
Right.
So I think it's more for those who are looking for funding from grant makers. If you're getting all your funding from individual donors and your own programs, then you probably don't need to be a member. But if you're looking for that other kind of funding,
of course they need to be a member because it's the nonprofit community in Maine, right?
Well, and with Maine Association of Nonprofits. So
Scott had his show a couple weeks ago.
Okay, both of them together. So.
Well, good. So, do you have any questions for me?
What are you most trying to accomplish? What message are you most trying to get out to nonprofits with this program?
The biggest message that I want to get out is that it's made up of people like you and me, and that it may be insurmountable when you look at it in the big picture, but if you begin looking at the small pieces of each nonprofit and what they do and the community resources out there, and you put together a good plan to make it happen, you can really begin tying in a good plan for long-term sustainability. So many nonprofits I see in today's world are just going after the big gift and everything else versus taking the time and nurturing the gifts and nurturing the donors and the foundations to plan long-term, and that they need to take their strategic plan and the goals with the plan and tie it in with the development plan, because a lot of times they don't talk to each other. So
I would agree. It's people, it's organization, and it's focus.
Right. Well, thank you. This was great. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. Next week, we're going to have Susan Lamb, Executive Director of the Maine chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. That'll be an interesting dynamic, because we haven't had an association like that on before. The music of the show appears courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find the music at www.michaelhubbard.com. Check out Mike's website to see where he's playing this weekend. Thanks again to Deb Danger, NPI's executive engineer. If you know of any nonprofit that would like to be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net.